Carrying Taps and also representing Ward 4. And I will now defer to my colleague to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Councilmember Angela Lawson, and I'm the vice chair of this committee. Nice to see everybody.
Yes. All right, and hopefully Councilmember Medina can join us here before long. So moving on, approval of our March 30th minutes. I don't have any changes. Councilmember Lawson.
Councilmember Marcano, I see that they're all correct. I wasn't here at that meeting
That's
though,
right.
so maybe I should abstain from the
Yes.
from those minutes.
All right. We can hold off until Councilmember Medina gets on, and then I'll ask him to see if he has any changes. All right. Moving on, I don't see anything under consent. So we'll go ahead and move to general business. So 4A, DEN 2013 informational update. I believe, Rachel, you're presenting, or Crystal?
Crystal Torres de Herrera. She is our Executive Vice President and Chief of Staff for the airport, and so she will be presenting today.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. You'll have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity to present. We're very excited about this. I will just note I am in and out of a hearing all day where I'm testifying, so I hope that we have a gap in time where I won't be called in, but in the unlikely event that I am called in, Rachel Gruber will take over for me wherever I am in the presentation. But we are very excited to be here with you today, and with that, we'll go to the next slide. So very excited about the partnership we have with Aurora, given we are right next door. And as many of you know, the airport is a city-owned enterprise owned by the city and county of Denver. We do not utilize taxpayer support. Everything we generate is our own revenue. We are the second largest airport in the world, if you can believe it. At 53 square miles, and we certainly have room to expand where we are only at 50% capacity. So certainly a very interesting economic development opportunity for not just those of us at the airport, but also for Aurora as we think about those opportunities for businesses, small businesses, and the people of Aurora as we're thoughtful about our future. Next slide, please. We'll go to the next slide, please. So here's a snapshot of the airport post-pandemic, which is very interesting. You may have heard me say in the past, the pandemic obviously had a major impact on Denver International Airport, but it also sped up the growth of Denver International Airport. Going into the pandemic, we were not even one of the top 10 busiest airports in the world. And so now to be coming out of the pandemic as the third busiest airport in the world, not the United States, but the world, planet Earth, is pretty extraordinary. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is, what's that competitive advantage, as well as some of the real opportunities we have here. So as you see here, we are home to over 23 airlines, which is a great advantage, helps keep prices low, right? We don't just have one major carrier that comes in and monopolizes. We have a good group of market competitors here. We have over 210 nonstop destinations, which we are always trying to increase, as well as over 25 international destinations. And what's so significant about that is that we have actually recovered all of our flights and routes that we had lost during the pandemic. So for example, our flight direct to Tokyo on United just came back on this spring, and it was the last international flight to come online that had been suspended during the global pandemic. And then we serve 15 countries, which we are always looking to expand. And you'll hear me talk a little bit more about our efforts to get into the continent of Africa. And Aurora has a really important role to help us play in all of that. And so we're very excited about looking for these areas where we think we can really make a strong argument to get more air service on the international front. We have over 1,200 companies working at DEN. Many of them are small businesses. We are really mindful of whether they're employees living in your area in Aurora or whether they're companies who are based in Aurora. But we have a vibrant community of small business out here at the airport. And we have over 30,000 badged employees that call Denver International Airport their employer. And so that is really important to us. We definitely want to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure that the airport is accessible to these employees, whether it's, partnering with RTD to think about eco-pass pricing, or the times in which the buses or the trains run, or also just being thoughtful about the opportunities that those employees are given. This is our most precious resource is our employees. And so we're constantly thinking of what we can do to make sure that we retain that top-notch talent. And then also the airport is the largest economic engine for the region, bringing in over $33 billion annually. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, you'll see on the bottom here that we have actually, and you can't tell as much because they're rounding here, but we have actually surpassed the passenger traffic that we had in 2019, and one of the few airports to do so. And so we continue to see that increase. And that's great news for all of us, right? And particularly for all of our surrounding neighbors in terms of the money and the economic development and the job opportunities and other opportunities that brings. Let's go to the next slide, please. So the question then becomes, with all this growth at Den and that we're exploding so fast, what are we going to do about it? How do we meet the challenge? And so CEO Phil Washington, this Vision 100 is his plan for how this airport is mobilized to meet the challenge of serving 100 million annual passengers. And we believe that we will be at 100 million annual passengers in the next 7 to 8 years. Right now, the US airport that is serving over 100 million annual passengers, there's actually only one airport in the world right now that hits this number, and that's Atlanta. And so we do believe we will be catching up to that in the next few years. So this is Vision 100, this slide here. This is what we refer to as our strategic plan. In the orange ribbon at the very top, these are what we consider our guiding principles. Values that are so fundamentally important to everything that we do. They are embedded in all of our initiatives, all of our thinking. And so sustainability and resiliency. We want to be the greenest airport in the world. We think that is doable. And we think that there's no better place than Colorado to do that. Equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. This was so important to us. We believe it should touch everything that we do. And we are really a market leader in aviation on this front. And it was so important for us to also have accessibility as part of this, because we want to make sure that no matter who's coming through our doors, whether they're flying or they're working, that they have a sense of belonging, that we have thought about what they need. And we are very intentional about that. We are always looking to see how we can do more in this front. And you'll hear a little bit more from me about that later on. Operational excellence. We are an airport. We have to make sure that people get through efficiently and safely, right? We are connecting loved ones and families to each other and to the world. And we take that incredibly seriously. And then enhancing the customer experience. We know that if you show up and the escalators or the walk-elators or the elevator's not working, that is not a good impression, and we don't like that. And as a mother of 3, when I travel through here and an escalator's not working and I got to carry my bags and my 3 kids through there, it's tough. So we get that. I'm going to now move to the bottom part of the screen and talk about the pillars. This is the specific lines of work that we're doing as we think about Vision 100. So it is very intentional that our first pillar, pillar 1, is about people, empowering our people. Because again, you heard me say, we believe that our team, our people, not just the employees that are directly employed by the city and county of Denver, but all the badged employees working at this airport are our greatest resource. And we're also very mindful of how tough a market it is still to make sure that we're always retaining and getting that best talent. And so we're making the business case to all of our badged employees that this is the best place for them to work. And so we're in the process of continuously developing a workforce leadership strategy, right? How do we make sure that folks that come in our door know how they're going to climb and grow? And what is that pathway that they're creating for them to do so, right? I'll take Rachel Gruber as an example. How does she know that she's going from being a manager of regional affairs, and how does she work her way up to be on the senior leadership team in the C-suite, right? There needs to be a pathway for her, for the operational workers, for the janitors, for the concessions workers, for all these different folks that if they want to switch business lines or they want to try something different, we still want them in the aviation space and we want them at Denver International Airport. The other thing we've done is establish the Center of Equity and Excellence in Aviation. This is a first of its kind of best in class model that is really the home to a lot of these strategies that you're hearing about, whether it's career pathways, but it's also looking at people who are not yet at DEN. It's not just the employees of today, it's the employees of tomorrow. It's partnering with Aurora Public Schools and other public schools and saying, you have the third busiest airport in the world in your backyard. What does that mean for our young people? How do we get them excited about aviation? How do we prepare them to take advantage of these high-paying jobs? It's all of that. It's creating that buzz, that pathway to really make the Colorado Rocky Mountain region the hub for aviation talent, not just in the United States, but in the world. And we really think that America, as the country that put the first man on the moon to be the global epicenter of aviation talent, we want to be the Silicon Valley of aviation talent. If people think about where do I get the best people in aviation, we want them to think of the Rocky Mountain region. And that's what we're trying to build. And why not here? Why not our youth? Why not this be our opportunity together? So we're incredibly passionate about that. It also brings in tremendous opportunity for small businesses because, again, we're not just thinking vertically about pathways, we're also thinking horizontally. So if we have some small business that are, maybe we have some partners that only do construction right now. Maybe they want to expand their reach. There's training, there's best practices, there's thought leadership that we can develop coming out of the Center of Excellence and Equity in Aviation and help them grow that. We want them to grow their footprint. And then, also an important component of this is employee innovation. We know that people like me in the C-suite, I'm not the one with the best ideas about innovation. It's our employees. It's the people on the front line who are doing this. And we want to be market leaders in innovation. The airport is a perfect lab to try new things, new ideas, but to also give employees that freedom to be able to innovate and cut that red tape. We don't want this to feel bureaucratic. We want this to feel exciting and innovative. And so we're very focused on all of that as well. We think that that's an important component of empowering our people and making sure that this place moves at the speed at which we all do. The second pillar, growing our infrastructure. We've got a lot of major projects. Any of you that have been through to the airport recently, you've seen the progress in the terminal, right? We've got that middle section, which is now built out for United, Southwest, and Frontier. And we're now continuing to build that out for the rest of the airlines. And that is really like remodeling your kitchen while you are still living in it. It is not easy. We thank all of you and your constituents for your patience. But it is so important because if we are going to reach 100 million annual passengers, we have got to make the passenger voyage more efficient. We've got to do more with what we have. And so we're very excited about that. So obviously completing those major projects, building out the land around the airport and taking advantage of those economic development opportunities, that's all critical. And then maintaining what we have, right? This is the stuff that is so important, but so many folks don't talk about, right? Which is asset management. It's to the point I made earlier, which is about wanting to make sure that all the equipment works when people are walking through here, because it's so central to their experience and to people being able to feel like they had a great experience at the airport. And then last but not least, expanding our global connections. We are constantly trying to grow both our domestic and international network, and we're also exploring more opportunities on the air cargo side. And I think that's something in particular with Aurora that we can continue to explore. There's a lot of opportunities there. We recognize we're never going to be Memphis. We know that, but we do think that we can do more and that there's some real advantages to that. Next slide, please. So as you heard me say, we believe that we are going to hit 100 million annual passengers in the next few years. And this is based on projections that we're showing right around 2032. But again, our passenger traffic continues to exceed our projections. So this could be moved up even more. So this just really drives home why Vision 100 is so important and why we, the airport, have to be ready for it. Next slide, please. So I did want to specifically talk about the different touch points with the city of Aurora. We have over 8,000, almost 9,000 employees who are badged employees at DEN who live in Aurora. That's a big number, and we're very proud of that, and we want to continue to grow that partnership. Again, we want to make sure that we have that healthy line of employees coming in, and with the youth also knowing that this can be a career path for them. We have 115 Aurora firms that are certified with the city and county of Denver, right? These are folks who are working on our projects, and we love that. 81 of the contracts issued by DEN have been to Aurora certified firms. So 21 Aurora certified firms on contracts. And then this is what we call 20 on the Airport Concession Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, ACDBE. This is an FAA required program. That's a big deal. These are a lot of the folks who are working with our concessions teams. But you should be really proud of that number, that such a large group of that come from Aurora. I think that speaks to the innovation and the creativity that is coming out of Aurora and the small businesses and how we want to continue to partner. And then we also have many of those on concession contracts at DEN. You know, the DEN Commerce Hub, which is within my portfolio, is a great resource. And we definitely want to make sure we're constantly sharing information with all of you so you can send it out in your newsletters or your town halls to all the small businesses that are in Aurora, because this is about making it as easy and user-friendly as possible for small businesses to do work at DEN. And we are constantly on the lookout for how do we get more small business here and how can we grow the existing small businesses that are here. So that way, perhaps they're a subcontractor today, but we want them to be a prime tomorrow, right? This is about generational wealth and bringing that back to our communities. Next slide, please. So here's an employee heat map, which is in the materials, and we're happy to share maybe bigger if it's easier to see following this presentation. But this really shows the different parts of Aurora where our employees are coming from. And we thought this was so important for all of you to see. But this is important, right? And so as we think about connectivity to the airport and how we get employees there, whether it's rail or bus or other ways, this is an important topic for all of us. And we want to continue this conversation. Next slide, please.
Oh,
So empowering our people, I'm going to dive in a little bit more. Next slide.
Crystal,
Yes.
can you hear me? Sorry,
Yes.
is it okay if I jump in real quick? Because that last
Yes.
map actually addresses one of my questions that I had for y'all.
Sure.
So are you familiar with the disruptions to the R line?
I am aware of that.
Okay, great. Have you all reached into RTD about that just yet? We issued a resolution. I know that the subcommittee of Dr. Cog that I'm on for Arapahoe County is going to be weighing in, but I think your voices would be very important because you can see that the R line basically services the orange and red portions of
Right.
Aurora here. So.
Well, and our CEO resides in Aurora and he rides the train into DEN. So we also experience it at that level as well. And so look, we're happy to partner. We have a great partnership with RTD, but it is such a big impact to our workforce. Happy to think about ways we can be helpful in that front. We have a lot of different stakeholder meetings with RTD that we're currently engaged with. So we're happy to be a partner in that front. It's very important to us.
Okay, great. So y'all haven't issued any formal communication yet, but if you're interested, I'd love to work with you all on that. I'm sure.
Okay, we'd be happy to loop into that. And we've had conversations. I just don't think we've sent a formal letter, but it's something that definitely we're happy to partner on.
And Crystal, Councilmember Marcano, can I just, since we're
Yes,
on
ma'am,
this
please
subject really
jump in.
quick, just Crystal, thank you for that. Didn't mean to interrupt, but just to kind of tagline on that. Since you guys do have quite a few employees that are working at DEN, I'm hoping that anything that you can be on in terms of the TMA, something to make sure that we have some type of transit, because we're building so much out there, and people who either work in the inner core, who are coming out there to work at DIA or wherever we have all the manufacturing, they sometimes don't have the capability to get to work.
Right.
You have to go through all these hoops and hurdles. So I really hope with DEN being such a powerful organization that you could really be impactful on some of these associations as well. So just a comment on that.
I love that. And I know Rachel's on here and taking down this information, and we're happy to, you know, have more specific conversations following this, because that is it's so critical to us, you know, and it's something that we certainly talk about all the time, and also with the airlines, because they've got a lot of employees as well. And so they are very involved in this. And I think that's a very good group of folks to have advocating alongside with all of you for more service, more access into your district. So happy to continue that conversation. It's an important one, and it's linked to the future, right? You saw me say we're going to hit 100 million annual passengers. We have to staff up with employees to meet that too, right? And so we're going to need those employees and that workforce to help meet that need. And so are the airlines. Like, we're all very cognizant of that. So thank you. This is a great conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks for letting us interrupt.
Hey, this is good. I'm happy to have the interaction. So don't hesitate. So what I wanted to show here, this is the Westin Hotel, and this horizontal box that you see, this rectangle in red, is where the Center of Equity and Excellence in Aviation is going to go. And so to our earlier conversation, it's so powerful. We are very intentional. There's 70,000 square feet of space that we are building out underneath the Westin. So when you come in off the train, or you're on the plaza, maybe you're out here for, you know, a little putt-putt golf or a summer concert that we host. Underneath there are 70,000 square feet of space that we are building out for the Center of Equity and Excellence in Aviation. And we purposely put it on the rail line, on the bus line, in the Hotel Transit Center, because we want it to be accessible. We recognize that a lot of the workers or students that we bring in are going to be frontline people who are not going to just be able to afford, let me jump in the car, spend how much on gas, pay the day for parking. No, we wanted it to be really friendly and really accessible. We are also going to have on-site childcare, because we're very cognizant, right? People are coming from all walks of life, and we want to remove barriers. And so we want, you know, whether it's a single mom or whatever the situation is, we want folks to be able to use this resource to jumpstart their career in aviation. And as I mentioned earlier, build that global powerhouse for aviation talent. Next slide, please. So equity and infrastructure projects, you heard me talk about earlier how important it is for us to get small businesses to create that generational wealth in our communities, and the large number of small businesses that are generating from Aurora. So, you know, our CEO, Phil Washington, and John Picari, who is the former deputy FAA administrator, they together launched the Equity and Infrastructure Project. And this is all about walking the walk, right? Holding transportation industries in all modes, not just aviation. We're talking transit. We're talking, you know, the ports, a lot of different, all the modes of aviation, to say, hey, we are not just running subcontractor programs. We need to have a path for small businesses to become primes. And by being a part of this, we are going to commit to double the number of prime contracts that we awarded to historically underutilized businesses in 2025 as we did in 2021. So we've undergone a very extensive baselining effort. We said, okay, how many prime contractors that historically underutilized businesses did we have in 2021? And we need to now create the path to get to 2025 and double that number. And so what does that mean? It means we've gone through with painstaking detail all of the projects that we are anticipating, and said, we need to set aside and make sure that we know that we're going to have these opportunities for people to prime it. And we're tracking it on a dashboard. So that way, if perhaps one project doesn't yield the results that we're hoping for, we got to make up that difference somewhere else. So this is a really big deal for DEN and for the country, for all transportation in the country who has signed up for this. So this is very exciting for us, but it is certainly somewhere we are pushing the industry to do more. Next slide, please. So growing our infrastructure, let's go to the next slide. So you heard me talk about the Great Hall Project, and all of you have seen kind of how beautiful the middle sections are, and we're going to continue to build that out. This is actually a snapshot from the south end of the terminal, kind of by where you come up, and where's today South Security Checkpoint. But this is about the remodel when it's going to be done. Again, moving 100 million annual people through here. we have to clear out those security checkpoints that are currently on the floor and bring them up. Not only is it safer for people, so that way you don't have people just who have not been screened look over and be able to do something. It's also going to open up movement of people, and we want to really make sure that we're giving back to the people their terminal. And so we're going to have restaurants and lounge space and a child play area and places for people to actually come and relax and enjoy the airport in a totally different experience, all while moving security up and getting new security equipment that is faster, more efficient, top of the line. We are going to be the first post-pandemic security checkpoint that is going to be opening in the United States. And that's a big deal because we were able to learn some interesting lessons through it with TSA. And so we are definitely breaking some new ground here. Let's go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oops, we'll go back just one. The slide that we just passed over is the gate expansion project, which, you know, we had a decision point during the pandemic when there were literally like nobody in line except for like me and a TSA agent looking at each other. There were some, you know, it was got really slow at Denton for a period of time. And so we decided as an executive team, now is the best time possible to double down on our construction and to just go. Let's do it while the people aren't here and let's just go faster. And so, you know, we opened up 39 new gates at the airport last year. And that's huge. That's like taking Reagan National Airport and dropping it into Den and just being like, boom, whole other part of the airport. And because of the layout of our concourses, they just go straight out. We were just able to build off the sides. And that's just such a great advantage because most of the other airports in the United States cannot do it. They're landlocked. And this is where our land and all the land that we have is such a huge asset. But it's been great to see how also we've been able to get new furniture for our passengers, right? New nursing rooms, charging stations, and then we have outdoor patios on outsides of the concourses. So if you have not gone to the outdoor patio, you absolutely need to, because we are really, this is what, as we remodel the concourses, how we're upgrading and modernizing the facility and what it will look like. Next slide, please. Maintaining what we have. This is all about asset management. Let's go to the next slide. So this is really just a snapshot to give you a sense of the scale of what we are maintaining at Den. So we have over 8.2 million square feet, 7 million that we had prior to adding 39 new gates, now 8.2 million square feet to oversee the 6 runways. We've got the largest runway in North America. You know, people forget that we've also got a very long driveway with Pena Boulevard. So we've got 300 lane miles of roadway, 34,000 parking spaces, 6 public parking lots. And then I think something more of us that come through Den are more familiar with is the 320 escalators, elevators, walkolators that are always on, right? They have to always be operating. If we're going to do maintenance on one, we got to make sure all the others are working. So we're replacing 90 of those by 2025 because, as you guys can imagine, many of those are original to when Den was first constructed. And so they're in need of some TLC and replacement. And then, of course, you know, 100 restrooms, and we're renovating as we, you know, in the terminal and then on the concourses as we go. Next slide, please. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you and open it up for any additional questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Crystal. I'll go ahead and recognize Councilmember Lawson before myself. And I do see that Councilmember Medina has joined us. I'm going to request that you unmute yourself here so that you can also participate in the conversation. All right, go ahead, Councilmember Lawson.
Thank you, Councilmember Marcano. Crystal, thank you for the wonderful presentation. Just doing a lot of traveling a couple months ago. It seems like every other week I was in the airport. When you guys get the extension, I just navigated how to navigate all these extensions, but it looks fabulous. So thank you for that. Just a question about the youth piece. I know that you guys go to most of the school districts. Is that so? And do you guys have any type of like internship programs for youth?
Absolutely. I love this question. And also just good to see you because I miss everybody. I feel like we're still catching up on all of our post-pandemic. Get to see everybody. We do. We have a series of internships. So Rachel, I'll ask that you share those opportunities with this team. But we are in active conversations with the school districts all around because for us, it's talking to them about how do we get it, is there an aviation track that we can partner with them on? We're also talking to MSU Denver. They've got a great program there that is aviation specific. So how do we bring together this consortium and group of people that can really leverage for our youth, making it real? It's not just a visit to the airport, it's something they can get in their classroom, right? There's dedicated curriculum. We hosted a group of public school teachers here not that long ago to talk about some potential curriculum that they are going to do. And so we are always happy to do that. And just a great advantage because, for us, we want all the youth around us to be excited about aviation and to know that this is for them, that it's not just pilots and stewardesses, that there is every kind of job that it is at any other business is at the airport. And we want them to know, like, come to Den, come do this with us. And so we're very excited about that.
Okay, just a part B to that, Councilmember Marcano, if I can continue. So
Absolutely.
that's fantastic. I guess for me, looking at organizations, especially the size of Den, it's just really reaching a lot of these kids who are kind of having disadvantaged economic situations that may not have the access. And I think that this program, if you guys do have internships or things like that, I know you have these programs in aviation, would just be really helpful looking at the overall, especially in Aurora, and some of the things
Yep.
that we're dealing with our youth. So I am glad that that is something that you're working on, and I hope that it could be, really the word can get out a little bit more about the programming. So.
Absolutely. And if there's anything, we can send all of you, whether it's for your newsletters that you send out to your constituents, like I said, or your town halls, or however it is that you best communicate with the people you represent, let us know because we can send you information that you can share. I just think that's such an opportunity, a partnership.
Okay, thank you so much. And I would definitely like that information. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if we get sent that to the full council, I think we would all very much appreciate that. Thank you. Councilor Medina.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for the presentation. Yeah, I certainly appreciate the your first pillar there of empowering the people, because I'm a firm believer in that, is that allowing them to be part of the decision making helps them to also invest in the companies as well as I think incorporating them in the vision so that they also see themselves as part of what you're trying to build. Because I think if people see that, they're more likely to, give you their all and do the work that you need, but also it fulfills their dreams of, moving up. And I appreciate the fact that you're with your frontline staff of the progression of giving people opportunities to move up and not be stagnant. And so I certainly applaud all those things and look forward to seeing more of it. I'll travel later this month, so I'll get to see some of the new stuff.
Well, thank you so much for that support. It means a lot to us.
Yeah, so I had a few follow-ups here. So we talked a bit about using this, what is a regional asset to kind of help, folks kind of become entrepreneurs or develop their skills or business. So this is I think, great opportunity to, basically help us build some community wealth here. One of the big complaints that I've received in the past is just how difficult it is, especially as a women or minority-owned contractor, to get a foot in the door. So what are we going to do to help those folks get in, especially as the airport continues to grow and it becomes such an even larger economic development force in our city?
Right. And, certainly we're mindful of those challenges as well. I think it's the combination of one, having all the programming that the Commerce Hub is doing to really help explain to small businesses, here are the technical requirements for doing business at Den. It's different than doing business with the city and county of Denver. It's different than doing business with Aurora. Like, there are specific technical requirements that the federal government requires that are different, and walking them through that. So we have all that programming through our Commerce Hub, and I will make sure that Rachel sends out that information so all of you have it. But there's also, through, as you heard me say, the Center of Excellence in Aviation, CIA as we call it, program that we are developing for small businesses as well to also grow them in terms of, hey, you don't have to just be siloed in one area, one part of the industry. How do we get you these skills to transition to other parts of Den? And how do we expand your base to help you have different revenue streams? So we're also looking at that. And then kind of the third thing would be, the equity and infrastructure project, where we are committed. We made a commitment, Den did, to double the number of small businesses that we want to see as primes. Those combination of the three, right? The commitment, and we have broadcast that commitment to our prime contract partners. Like, it is our expectation, right? As we like to say, flip the script. I'll give you an example. Hensel Phelps, right, bid on a project. They put a small minority contract as the prime, and they're subbing. We want to see more of that. We're looking for that. And so our business partners, right, because it's on us to use our bully pulpit too, to say, these are the kind of partnership and, business couplings that we're looking for. So bring that to us. And so we have definitely made the market aware of those preferences. And I think the combination, because it takes all those different forces to come together, we're hoping to see some movement. So I'll make sure Rachel shares that information, because it is something we are very focused on.
Happy to hear that. Second question for you here is, you mentioned a post-pandemic security checkpoint. So I guess what's going to be appreciably different between that and kind of like the arrangement that we're all accustomed to? Am I going to have to step confused?
Yeah, absolutely. So number one, it's going to be up top. It's going to be up a level, right? Because right now you come in and you go down to security. It's going to be up top, and it's going to be enclosed. That is for a variety of safety and security reasons. And so it's going to be in more of a vestibule format, but the equipment's all going to be new. So if you might have seen some of the like pearly white, kind of, it's got a curve to it, different than the straight lanes. These are what we call our Scarabee lanes. And so these allow more people to go through faster. So by doing that, what does that do? It means your line wait is not as long, right? It gives the passengers a little more autonomy in seeing where is my bag, what's going on. It's just easier. But it's going to be a different experience. And so we're excited about it, because for us, it's like, we don't want people to be waiting in line for a long time, and we want people to be safe. And so it's trying to bring those two together, to get people through security as quickly as possible in a safe manner.
Yeah, the less time we spend in line, the more time we have to go spend at the little businesses that pop up at the
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
And then my last question, I had been reading a lot about the construction costs, the timelines, and overruns at the Great Hall and some of the other work that's been done at the airport. So, and there's a lot more to come based off of the work, rather, hopefully not delays, in terms of the airport's growth. So I'm curious, this is all currently contracted out, right? All this,
It is.
most of this work?
Yep. It is.
All right. So I am interested to learn why, if we see all this future growth for the airport, has Denver not maybe they have, and I'd like you to tell us more about that. They have looked at bringing some of these teams in-house, since there's a long, I guess let's call it job security or need there, to bring some of this in-house to maybe realize some efficiencies, as opposed to having like the repeat cost overruns and whatnot.
Yeah, so let me give some context, because I'm sure you're referring to the auditor's report that he released that generated some media on the Great Hall. So
Yeah.
he was looking at a retrospective, like looking at when we had that very public divorce with our former developer from Spain. And so at that point in time, yeah, there were overruns. But since we've taken over the project, we actually completed phase one, $25 million under budget. And we are actually ahead of schedule. So you have, it's typical in an audit, they're looking behind. And so I think for readers, it wasn't clear that this is like, it's not that there are overruns today. It was a synopsis of what had happened in the past and his critique of that. And, we get it. We made a change for a reason. And so, the contract teams that are working there, we have not had the overrun issue with, and we have a very good working relationship, and we are always looking at ways to bring in-house more of that talent. And it's an active conversation about, shifting from a contractor model to an employee model. But it takes time because our budget has to be able to absorb those staffing increases. But it is something that we are actively talking about and planning for the future. It takes a while to actually implement.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely not something you can turn on a dime for, but sounds like you're already moving in that direction. So that's great. Thank you so much for that update. Any further questions or comments from my colleagues? All right, seeing none, thank you both so much for the presentation. We really appreciate it. Oh, and looking forward to the communications on RTD issues and also the hub, the Commerce Hub. So appreciate
Thank you all so much. We greatly appreciate it. Have a great
Thank you
rest of
so
your day.
much.
Bye.
All right, next up on the agenda is for B, speed reduction strategies and lane rebalancing. I'm very excited for this. All right, and looks like Carly, you're gonna have the floor for this.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to present. Let me work on sharing my screen because I'm bad at multitasking. All right, is this visible for everybody? Okay, got a thumbs up, great. Yes, Chair Marcano and members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to present on this one. My name is Carly Campuzano, and I am the traffic manager in the Public Works Department. And this presentation is about speed reduction strategies and lane rebalancing. And also just thanks to Den for that presentation. I think that was great info and a tough act to follow for sure. So switching gears a bit with this one. So just going back for the little bit of history. So this item is informational only. This kind of topic started last year in 2022 when council requested some information on downposting speed limits on residential streets in the 20 is Plenty program. So back in January of this year, we presented information on the 20 is Plenty program, which was really meant to be just a higher level summary of the program and different aspects of that locally in Colorado. And coming out of that, there were a few different action items and discussion points from council. And so we really developed this presentation as a way to do more of a deep dive into that topic and to kind of expand the topic as well, to talk about other streets and not just local streets. So that's just to give you a little bit of context on this one. So here's the agenda of this presentation. So to start off, I'm going to go over some of those 20 is Plenty items that we went over in January, just to recap since it has been a few months. So I'll have a few slides on that just with the background and key takeaways. Next, we'll dive into more information on details of road safety and what we call the 3 E's of road safety, which are kind of the fundamentals. Then I'm going to give details on a Denver speed limit reduction feasibility study that they recently completed and that we were really actively involved in on the city side as a stakeholder. Next, I'll go over some speed reduction strategies for the city of Aurora that we've identified. And then I'll go over some lane rebalancing example projects, as well as roundabout information, which were also requested coming out of that last meeting. So that's kind of a higher level view of what we're going to cover today. And then we'll finish with next steps. So just to start out, 20 is Plenty background. This is what we presented before. So 20 is Plenty is an initiative across the US and in other countries as well to lower the posted speed limit on local roadways. And generally, the initiative's about lowering it from 25 to 20. And the goal of this is to reduce crash severity and improve livability on local streets. So right now in the city of Aurora, the default speed limit on residential streets is 25 miles an hour, and that is located within our city code. So what we went over a few months ago was that just some key findings from other agencies who have implemented this and rolled this out to reduce the speed limits from 25 to 20 on local streets. So the most applicable local partner who's done this before is Boulder, Colorado. They made this change pretty recently and conducted a pretty thorough before-after study. Portland, Oregon did as well, and they published the results. So both of these agencies found that when they lowered the speed limit from 25 to 20, it really did not have an impact on actual speeds of vehicles or actual driver speeds. And both of these studies had a lot of different data points to support those findings. So those were the higher level findings of our peer agencies. So then the key takeaways from that previous presentation are that in municipalities where this initiative was adopted and where the speed limits were decreased, changing speeds alone did not impact driver behavior. And what we're seeing is that it's really more street design that has an impact on vehicle speeds, and also that severe crashes are just not really happening on local streets. They're happening on the higher speed kind of multi-lane facilities like arterials. So those were our key takeaways from January. And so coming out of that and with feedback from you all, we wanted to kind of dive more into this topic. And so that's what we're planning to continue with next. So just getting more into just safety and speed foundations, I wanted to cover the 3 E's of road safety, which are education, enforcement, and engineering. This was a concept developed a really long time ago, about 100 years ago, just as a way to simplify and explain the complex foundation of roadway safety and the different factors that play into it. So first we have education. As really just providing information to increase driver awareness and hopefully motivate people to change their behavior. So some examples of this are, different sorts of messaging. You all might have heard one of the bigger campaigns of the 90s, which was Click It or Ticket, was a kind of a safety campaign. So that would fall into that category. Different types of public art, having community meetings, distributing yard signs, and then at the city, we also distribute some information through the city's social channels. So there's different strategies with that, but that all falls into more of the education piece. And then next we have engineering, which is changing the physical characteristics of the built environment. And the engineering piece is really what we're going to focus more in on in this presentation. Since we are the Public Works Department, I have to focus more on that E, but the other ones are important as well. So at the city right now, we have a traffic calming program. We recently updated our roadway standards and roadway manual, and we're planning to do that again in the future. And then I'm going to go over a lane rebalancing pilot project a little bit later in this presentation as well. So those are some engineering examples, but we'll get into others as well. And then on the enforcement side, I'm not going to cover that too thoroughly in this presentation just because I know that APD has a separate policy committee and a lot of different initiatives they're working on, but enforcement is also a key piece, and that's issuing citations or warnings for violations to encourage compliance. So these 3 are the kind of the main pillars that have been in the industry for a very long time, and you can kind of think of them as legs of a stool, whereas if one of these isn't in place, the stool isn't going to be stable. And you really need all 3 of these to have good traffic safety fundamentals. So that's kind of the higher level information on the 3 E's and roadway safety. So next, I'm going to kind of describe and go over some of the findings from Denver's speed limit reduction feasibility study. So this study, I think they did most of the work in 2021 and 2022. They did engage a consultant to help out with this and had multiple stakeholder meetings. So we were involved pretty heavily on the city side as well, kind of brainstorming strategies and coming up with different items that ended up in this final study and the recommendations. So what Denver did is they evaluated a lot of different strategies, really still based on those 3 E's that we just talked about, and also kind of divided them up based on roadway type. So knowing that not every strategy is going to be as applicable on different types of roadways. So the different roadway types that Denver utilized were, first of all, neighborhood streets, then arterial and collector streets, what they called safety zones, which could represent like school zones and construction zones, and then slow zones, which are just special designations or business districts. Chair Marcano, I know you had questions about business districts last time, so that's kind of what would fall in what Denver classified as a slow zone. And so for each of these different roadway types, they came up with a table of different strategies for each type. And so I'll just show you a little bit of what those looked like. And I'm not going to cover all of it in depth, but I'll cover more in depth when we talk about the Aurora recommendations. So what Denver did is they developed different tables of strategies. And on the very left, it's a little small on my screen now that I'm looking at it, but you could see education, enforcement. And then on the next slide, I'll show you some of the engineering strategies as well. So they list the strategy. They took a dive into really doing some research on the actual effectiveness where they've been implemented. And then they also took a look at staff resources as well as cost and then overall timing. So the resources and cost play a big role in this to figure out like what can we do and how quickly. So a lot of the strategies are good, but then when you look at your fiscally constrained option, like alternative, things, the price of things, even just signs, adds up. So that's how Denver tackled it. But Denver is a very dense urban area. There's different downtown considerations. They have like their Wash Park district. They have different areas of urban design, which are just a little different than our characteristics in Aurora. I mean, they have some similarities for sure, but definitely some differences. This slide just shows more of the engineering considerations. So I won't read through all these, but just to know that this is kind of the level of effort and engagement that Denver took in their study process. So looking at all this, and after talking to you all last time and getting some feedback, what we did at the staff level at the city is we really went through a lot of those Denver strategies and feedback we've received from you all, from our constituents, different residents, and just commuters that call in, and went over what we think should be our good strategies to roll out in Aurora. Knowing the different types of Aurora land uses and different considerations, but really still building on that groundwork and foundation that Denver already spent a lot of time and effort preparing. So in this table, you can see some rows are in white, and those are items that we are already doing. So I put a lot of them as ongoing and just shaded them in white to make that clear. So in the education piece, what we've worked on before is murals and public art. Specifically along the business district in Colfax, you might see the medians painted. We worked with a muralist in our planning department to get that done. We've worked on different types of art like cabinet wraps. There's been different types of art in roundabouts, for example. So those are some different strategies. We also talk about traffic calming a lot to the public when they call in or just during public meetings. And we've attended some of your individual ward meetings as well. We've also occasionally attended HOA meetings where there's interest as well. We provided yard signs that people can rent for free. They can just check them out and then return them. So that all plays into that education piece. And then on more of the engineering side, a lot of what we've done is through our neighborhood traffic calming program. That program has been active since 2019. It's a program that council decided to fund, and we've had a certain amount of funding allocated each year for that program. So we get resident applications and then look at what's appropriate for each type of roadway. So through that program, we've been able to install a lot of speed cushions. We've installed radar speed feedback signs. Occasionally, we've increased speed limit sign density of just the static signs to make sure they're visible entering communities. We've prioritized smaller median islands for crosswalks to make them a little safer and to decrease speeds. And we also regularly look at school zone signage and make recommendations and updates to those using internal staff resources. So a lot of those are things we're already doing and are actively doing and will continue to do. And then in yellow, you can see some of the new strategies that we've identified. And I'll talk more about how we'll get some of these done on the next couple slides. But first, one interesting idea that came out of the Denver study was in some areas, it might be appropriate to paint speed limits on the actual pavement just to bring awareness to what the speed limit is, to make sure people see it and it's visible. In different areas, we've looked at feasibility for installing raised crosswalks and planning for those. The 13th corridor study is a good example of that. That was presented to council last week, a couple weeks ago. So we have multiple raised crosswalks planned for part of that, as well as the Montview project. So that's something that we'll look at rolling out potentially in the future. One additional thing where Denver has had a lot of success is changing signal timing overnight to facilitate lower speeds and to time a corridor for the speeds that we're intending people to go. Right now, overnight, our signals resting green on the main street. So this is a strategy that I think could be particularly effective on Colfax. For example, would maybe be a good place to start. So that's a new strategy that we're going to look more into. Updating our school zone flasher policy. We've been working with APS and Cherry Creek School District and think that it would be good to kind of review that policy and look at what changes need to be made and then the budget impacts and what we could do each year with those. And then some other strategies, which I think are going to roll into a larger effort that we're working on with the transportation multimodal master plan, are updating roadway design standards and possibly looking at different design speeds and what the state of the practice really should be or is and how we can roll that out. Conducting public engagement just for this, I think was in a coordination with a lot of our other efforts, I think would go a long way to seeing what the public and what the residents want to see. and then evaluating and implementing lane rebalancing projects. So we actually do have a task for this also within our multimodal master plan, and about to go over just one example of what could be done for that. So those are some of our ideas for Aurora and what we see as items that we really should look at progressing and moving forward with. So now I'm going to get into more details about a example or pilot lane rebalancing project. And this was also requested as part of coming out of our last TAPS meeting. So just providing more information on that. So we looked throughout the city for a roadway that could be just a good pilot roadway as an example for some of the different things we could do with that width to repurpose it. And the roadway we decided to show for this is Yale, from Nome to Vaughan. So Yale is currently a 4-lane minor arterial. There is a painted median, 40-mile-an-hour design, or a posted speed, I should say. In general, we chose Yale because we knew that traffic volumes were relatively low, and even though it's a 4-lane section, we were pretty confident that the number of through lanes could be reduced in this area, and we wanted to show an example that could be feasible. So that was another reason why we selected Yale to start with, and then provides access to Westerly Creek. And then there are some on-street bike lanes towards the eastern end of the corridor, but they're not sufficient length and they just end. So another reason why we thought that Yale could be a good area to look at some pilot examples for a lane rebalancing project. So what we did, we have developed 3 different alternatives just to show you as ideas for what we could do with the extra space. So for each of these, I just called them alternatives A through C. And so for each of these, you'll see the existing cross-section on the left side, and then the alternative cross-section on the right side. And one thing to note is that we kept the curb-to-curb width the same for all of these, just because whenever you start moving curbs, projects get really, really expensive and impactful, both drainage and utilities and everything. So these are the same curb-to-curb widths for all of these examples. Another thing to note is we do show sidewalk installed on the south side of Yale. And that's because we already received funding, grant funding for a sidewalk project that I know Councilmember Marcano has supported for years now, it seems. Yes, so we showed that as well in each of the alternatives. So the existing section, 4 lanes, part of the area has a painted median, part has turn pockets developed. And so the first alternative shows a buffered bike lane on each side. So this is pretty straightforward. We took a traveled lane and put a 6-foot bike lane along with a buffered area instead. And the buffer could be different things. We just decided to show posts, but it could be Westerly Creek style with some sort of curb or something else. So we just decided to show posts for this effort. So that's one alternative. The next alternative is a cycle track. So it's bidirectional bike traffic on one side of the street. So we would have enough pavement width to do alternative A and to put them on both sides, but this is just showing you that if we were really constrained on space, one way to save a few feet could be this type of treatment, although this would make it a lot more complicated at intersections to get people through. So, but it is a different alternative that we wanted to show for this effort. And then the last alternative I'm going to show is the buffered bike lanes with a raised median. So there could be a raised median through part of the corridor. I think we would probably need to break it to do the turn lanes that are there. We would need to do a bigger traffic study to know how long those turn lanes need to be. But this is one option, and definitely the most expensive of the options since there's more civil work involved, but just something we wanted to show as something else that could be done with the space. So those are the 3 alternatives. And then I wanted to show a couple examples of roundabouts as well, because I know that was requested coming out of the last meeting as well. So this sketch shows what we call a compact roundabout or mini roundabout on Conservatory. We recently put a few roundabouts out to bid, so this is one that we have actually finished the design with and do plan to construct. And so where we're constrained by right-of-way and we have a roadway section that's, maybe currently has a lane in each direction and a bike lane. One option we could look at are these mini roundabouts, which have mountable splitter islands and mountable center islands. So this is just one example. I think, cost-wise, these are still pretty impactful because we are moving curb lines. And from a right-of-way perspective, we sometimes are constrained just because we're trying to deflect people coming in so that they make that circular movement. But this is an example that could be implemented for different roadways with a single lane roundabout. And then we just wanted to generate a graphic showing what a multi-lane roundabout could look like. So this is just a rendering. It's the design-wise, it's not perfect, but just showing that we could have a multi-lane roundabout on a roadway like Yale if we did need the travel lanes in each direction, and that could still improve overall pedestrian safety and could decrease speeds. So this is showing what a multi-lane roundabout could look like. So I wanted to get into a little bit on pros and cons with roundabouts. I think the benefits are crash reduction and safety improvements. So there have been a lot of different studies that show that roundabouts are much safer than stop-controlled intersections, and they can be safer than signals as well, just with having less conflict points. They provide traffic calming, so that's a benefit. I think a lot of times they can also provide traffic operational benefits. And then different placemaking, there's different opportunities to put different art, sometimes in the center, depending on how much space you have to work with. And then some of the cons, I think the main con is cost. Roundabouts tend to be very expensive. They can have utility impacts. You generally do have to impact curb lines to design even the smaller ones. Right now, our compact roundabout examples that I showed, we're estimating those are probably about $500,000 each, which is still pretty pricey and is almost the cost of a signal. And then larger roundabouts could be $1 million to $2 million. So we have a larger roundabout that we just put out to bid. We're constructing this year near Regis Jesuit High School, and that one came in at over $1 million. So that was a pretty large roundabout. Oh, go ahead. Do you have a question?
Carly, sorry, can I jump in real quick?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Councilor
Yep.
Medina has to leave.
Okay.
Councilor Medina, before you leave, I wanted to ask if you had any changes to the minutes from our last meeting. So here, see if I can get him on mute.
I don't.
Okay, great. So you're good with approving those?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Councilor Medina, for jumping on. We appreciate you. Good luck with your next meeting. And sorry, Carly.
Oh, it's okay.
Continue where you were. I'll have
Yep, no
questions
worries.
about this later.
Okay, I figure, yeah, no worries. I'm almost done, just a couple more slides. So one of the main cons about roundabouts is the cost. They're very expensive. And then another issue with them is generally the right-of-way that they take. They do generally need more right-of-way than a standard intersection, and we don't always have the right-of-way available in a more of a retrofit situation. And then the drainage and utility impacts really continue to contribute to the overall project scope and the cost. So that's the general just roundabout information. And then this is my last slide. I just want to talk about some next steps. So on a staff level, we're planning to move forward with the Aurora strategies that we proposed, and would definitely love any feedback that you all have on those. And then another large effort that we are kicking off now is the multimodal transportation master plan. We actually have the request for proposal out for consultants right now. And we're planning to kick the project off this summer. So that one's moving along, and we're really excited to get that started. It'll be completed by the end of 2025. So with how large the scope is and the public engagement and everything we want to get out of that, it's going to be a pretty long process. And I think we talked before about continuing to update this committee on that timeline and process as well. So one task item that we specifically identified in the scope of that study is to identify lane rebalancing opportunities, to kind of take the citywide lens and see which projects would be most appropriate and how do those rank, and then approximately how much would they cost to know that where we could actually fit them in. And then there's another task item to review and recommend updates to our city standards, which is one of the strategies we talked about before. So I think having an outside consultant really helped to let us know what the standard of the practice is, and to really dig in with and do more of a deep dive into some other agencies' standards and what the state of the practice is, I think will be really helpful with this effort. And then there's also very robust public engagement included for the whole city. So hopefully we get a lot of good feedback on that from that process of what the priorities should be and what residents want to get out of this process. So I do think we can get a lot of this done within the multimodal transportation master plan effort. And then some other kind of ongoing city initiatives. Every year when we get the list of overlay locations, the overlay plan for the year, our group, as well as in public works, as well as transportation planning, we sit down and we go over all of the proposed overlay areas, and we look for areas where we can either fit in bike lanes or where we can improve the striping in some way. And in the past, we have done some lane reduction projects to maybe convert an extra travel lane that's really not needed into maybe on-street parking in a bike lane. So those are good opportunities, just because with the overlay, you're starting with a blank slate, and that can really cut down on the cost to get some of these projects done. So that's something that we have been doing and will continue to do. And then we're continuing to accept applications to our neighborhood traffic calming program, which has continued to be very popular. We get an application about every 10-ish business days, so a week and a half to 2 weeks. We have continually gotten applications, and we'll continue to distribute funding as we can through that program to do some of the other strategies that we've already talked about. So those are the next steps, and that is all I have. So with that, I can answer any questions that the committee has.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'll recognize Councilmember Lawson first. Do you have any questions or comments?
I just have a comment, Carly. So on the alternative one that you have, they have a lot of that down on the Colfax corridor. One thing that I did notice, just driving that corridor by the Capitol, when you make a left to Grant, they have the streets that kind of curve, like, you know, people are going southbound, I think northbound, southbound, coming from the Capitol. And when you're at the light making a left, that's really scary because people are having to curve, and if someone doesn't follow, then someone could actually hit you head on. And that's something I don't like about that particular situation on a left turn. So I guess if we're thinking about that kind of design, especially left turns and how the curvature is, because with those white kind of things in the middle, you're not straight anymore. So the people who are turning left, you're kind of curved, and then the people who are coming, you know, southbound, it's southbound, I think, they're having to curve a little bit too. And if you're not cognizant about that, then it can, I'm surprised they haven't had any accidents really, but I don't know what their crash rate is right there. Grant is pretty heavy along Colfax making left or right turn. So just some things that I hope that we look at if that's kind of a design. I think it's pretty good. It just makes things tighter, I know, on the Colfax corridor for sure. With those white things up in there, it makes everything tight, a lot tighter than what where they were. So
yeah, I see what you're saying. That's a good point. And when we do the design, we try to look at a lot of the details like that. But honestly, even after projects are implemented, we get feedback from drivers, and sometimes we adjust. So the area I'm thinking is Chambers in Florida. After the separated cycle track opened, we got some feedback from people who maybe they were going to make their southbound right and were not like trying to turn into the bike lane because they thought that was the travel lane. So we added signage and striping based on that feedback. But the hope is also that if you constrain, like make it feel more narrow, that people will go a little slower.
Definitely.
Even if
I agree.
Yeah, so that's the goal, but we are continuously evaluating and modifying as we can.
Oh, and it does
So
make
that's good
everything
feedback.
slower when you're going up on Colfax and you hit the Denver. I mean, everybody is slow, but there are some curvatures there that could really be, especially I know at Grant, because I mean, I've almost got hit because someone just kind of had to oops over here, or just make sure the turn signal is just maybe not on green, or I don't know. But that to me is something that I've noticed with that alternative in Denver and driving through Denver with their new revisions. So
it's good feedback. Thank you. Yeah.
Councilmember Lawson, I just want to clarify, like you're talking about like the turn right there on pretty much Grant and Colfax, like you said, with the reflector posts that are kind of like simulating a curb bulb out.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I could definitely see how folks might not be, you know, I guess expecting that on the turn there. I get that for sure. And I guess my question, if I can jump in to Carly on this point, do you see a difference in like, I guess, safety benefits and driver behavior when you actually build out the curb, like the physical curb out to that point versus the reflectors?
Yeah, I think the physical curb is definitely more ideal. It's just a lot more expensive. So, you know, the paint and posts, I don't think is any of our preference, but if you're looking to do more with less, that's a way to at least get something out there and get people used to it. I think there are maintenance considerations because sometimes it feels like we're trading capital dollars for maintenance dollars in some ways with those types of things. So yeah, I think the curbs are definitely preferred. And we do have a project, a grant funded project in Northwest Aurora right now that was a safety grant that we received. And we're going to be doing some permanent curbs and then some kind of paint and post ideas as well. And we'll see how they hold up, and we'll try to adapt if we can. But yeah, the curbs, it's just, there can be so many different drainage and cost considerations. I don't have a cost on me, but I think doing a full intersection of curb extensions could be $400,000 to $500,000 as well. So it's pretty pricey.
Yeah, definitely. All right, sorry, Councilmember Lawson, did you have any other questions or comments?
No other questions or comments?
All right, thank you. So Carly, I guess I want to start with the roundabout costs, because I've heard a lot about this, and I know that we've had some back and forth between some council members on this. My understanding was, and I thought that y'all had confirmed in the past, that a roundabout generally is going to be cheaper than a signalized intersection.
I do not think roundabouts are always cheaper than a signalized intersection. I know you requested some information in the past. I think it was before we got some of our recent bid data as well, but we just got the bid data back for Lewiston and Weaver, and it was about 1.1 million for that one roundabout. So signals generally cost 600,000 to 700,000, I would say. But a lot of our signals, we're not necessarily rebuilding all the curbs. So the main prices are like the steel and the caissons, and the roundabout projects just have so many impacts to different civil items that the prices do add up. But I think what you were also looking at was some like long-term maintenance cost considerations, maybe from the Carmel, Indiana example.
Yeah.
And long-term maintenance, it's hard to exactly say which one is cheaper, honestly, because I think with roundabouts, when you're forcing vehicles to turn, I think that could also rut pavement a bit in a different way. So I don't think that roundabouts are necessarily cheaper than a traffic signal for these larger intersections.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, and I know that like the site topography could play a role into that. I know that was a challenge because the Lewiston and Weaver example is over by Regis, yeah?
Yeah, and that one does have some retaining walls, but it's also
Yeah.
only 3 legs. So I feel like if you had a 4-leg intersection, you'd also add more civil costs in some ways, but you'd take away wall costs.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we put out to bid a few compact or smaller roundabouts as well, and we actually didn't get any responsive bidders, so we're having to rebid it. I think it's just a really hard market out there, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's good news.
Yeah, I was hoping to have more cost information for you for this as well. But yeah, not having great luck with bidders at the moment.
Gotcha. Yeah, and yeah, going back to the Carmel example we were given, like they had given us a couple of examples of basically what they realized was the savings, and I think that, and granted, this is now what 2 years ago since that conference, and this is looking back at their historic data. I think they had come back where it's like basically a roundabout intersection for them was about 600,000 to 700,000 versus a signalized closer to $1 million. So I guess maybe it's just a different market, different vendors over there that lead to those differentials. So, and also I think a lot of because they had a combination of growth, right? Because when they started their roundabout conversions, they were a city of like 40,000 people, I think, and then now they're 130, 140,000. So I think maybe when you're talking like greenfield, development, it might be a little less expensive because then they're able to determine their right of way as part of the city's growth. Whereas to your point, we're going to be very limited in where we could even do this because of how much right of way we have, or rather don't have in some areas.
Yeah, that's a great point. I feel like it's probably just not an apples to apples comparison, because what I'm looking at is like the infill or the retrofit conditions, like you were saying, and they might have just had a higher level greenfield cost type of analysis done. That very well could be.
Yeah, which that makes sense to me at that point, because you don't have to require any right of way, so, or mess with existing grading and drainage. Okay, so going back to the Yale section here, very excited to see that being used as an example. I guess aesthetically, I think alternative C might look better, but I would wonder, having a built median like that, are we going to actually see safety benefits from that? Because I know that that's a lot more capital cost and then civil cost as well, right? Because it's a physical obstruction. And then to your point, it also makes turn lanes a little more challenging. So can we kind of like go into that a little more?
Yeah, I would say that in general, whenever you're restricting access or restricting movements, there are safety benefits. But since we would still have the similar intersections and similar conflict points there, that's really where more of the crashes happen, is at the intersections. So I wouldn't expect there to be a significant safety benefit if we were to go in and try to fit in medians where we could. I think it would probably have a better traffic calming impact. What we've noticed is just doing paint alone in general doesn't have as big of an impact on vehicle speeds because people still feel like it's really wide. And that's especially the case in areas where we've restriped and have included on-street parking that doesn't get used, like Florida in your ward, for example, is an
Yeah.
example of that. So I think the median could probably slow people down more, but it is very expensive, and I don't think that it alone would really decrease crashes enough for that cost benefit to really work out in our favor.
Yeah, the conflict points are really where we want to be, making the
Yeah,
improvement. That's basically any intersection. Which leads us back to the roundabouts.
exactly. It all comes back to roundabouts.
Everything. We're just stuck on a roundabout of safety at all times. But with that said, with alternative A, are we looking at kind of having, I forget what the less controversial name is for those lanes where you have basically oncoming traffic to utilize the turn function? You know what I mean?
Oh, the two-way left turn lane.
Yeah.
Call them twiddles sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
We probably would not include that just because I feel like then it's less defined as far as where people are supposed to turn, and the access points aren't frequent enough to really need to do that. So
Okay.
we'd probably, in alternative A, I would think that we would most likely keep the turn lane configurations relatively similar to what they are now, unless there was a strong case to change some of them if we did a traffic study. So
Because I know those exist on Havana, and they tend to be
yes,
pretty dangerous conflict points, right? So at least
yeah,
judging by the amount of debris and broken glass that I see on them, I imagine that we have fender benders on a fairly regular basis there.
I would imagine so too. I think Havana's a little more complicated just because there are higher speeds and there are a lot of different access points with
Yeah.
individual driveways, and it's always controversial to close a driveway or restrict access that somebody already has. So Havana with kind of the more commercial area and the bid areas, and that's a lot more complicated. I also think that when you have left turning traffic across multiple lanes, it becomes less safe just because sometimes you've probably seen somebody else stop in one lane, they'll wave somebody through, they'll make the turn and won't see like the third person in the other lane. So I think the Havana example is, yeah, definitely, there are definitely some interesting turning movements going on, but I don't necessarily think we have those types of crash patterns on Yale in general. Just there's also
No.
lower volumes. So
Yeah, no, I agree that Yale's a really, really good, maybe like pilot corridor to try to, do something like this on. So I guess what does utilizing example A then still, or alternative A, what does that do to the current meandering, wobbly, for lack of a better word, looking painted median on Yale?
yeah, so we tried to just give typical sections to give an idea of what these could look like. But with any project that would move forward, we would lay out all the striping through the whole corridor. And this is what we do with overlay projects as well. We look to make it more consistent. So if there's a 10-foot median all the way through or 12-foot, we would try to maintain that. It just gets complicated because a lot of with a lot of these that we look at, the curb to curb width will vary throughout the corridor, and you have to absorb that extra space somewhere. So when we're doing the design, we try to decide, like, should it go to travel lanes? Should it go to bike lanes? Should it, like, where should the extra space go in a way that would make sense? And then we call out dimensions more clearly. So this was just meant to be like a general example, but those are the details we would need to get into. And I think part of our task for the multimodal transportation master plan is to lay out some of these. We obviously can't lay out everything in the city. We want to identify higher level priorities, but then if the budget is there, we could have the ability to have some general layouts of ideas included in the master plan as well.
Yeah. Because I guess part of what I wanted to maybe suggest here, for the pilot example, if possible, would be to like maybe go all the way down to Marina on the east end. Just because I know Heather Gardens does have pretty well used painted bike lanes and a lot of traffic calming in that area. And this would connect them all the way down through the access to Westerly Creek, and then get us over to more or less, where did we stop it on the other end? Harvard Drive, is that right? Or am I looking
That
at the
sounds
wrong-
right. Yeah,
Harvard
I think we've talked about
Drive.
roundabouts historically over there as well, actually.
Yeah, like if we could even get it down to Lima, to South Lima. That way you're basically connecting the residential portions, and then when we get closer to Parker, we just kind of go back to the current surface use, just because of the, you know, higher speeds and I think much more complicated layout of Parker and some of the you know, parking lots and access to there in that area. And so would that be something that we could maybe look at?
Yeah,
Just
I think that's a really good idea. So part of what we were trying to get out of our multimodal master plan is an update to our overall bicycle master plan. So we currently have a bike master plan that's, I want to say, at least 10 years old, and it's needed to be updated for a while. It's just such a large effort to do that we've been trying to allocate funding sources. So I think once we have that new bicycle master plan created, and it's developing as part of the multimodal master plan, that'll really help inform some of the limits. Because this project was mostly, you know, just picked by staff as feedback we've gotten from you all, an area you're really familiar with, and then just knowing that volumes were low and some other considerations. But ideally, we would look at this citywide and say, how does the network all fit together? And extending it very well could make sense for this project. I think you're probably right about that.
Great. And then my last little note here was kind of going back to the, what did we call that? The slow zones, right? For business districts. So I think I mentioned when we originally discussed 20th Plenty, like I had some car issues that I had to get taken care of. So I drove out to Tynan's on Havana, left my car in their shop, and then just walked up and down Havana for a little while. And yeah, you know, with the corridor study results, very excited to see those implemented, right? Because it's kind of like a hostile place, I feel, as a pedestrian. But one of the things that I think I mentioned during that meeting was that getting out of the car actually let me see more of the shops and services that are offered, as well as better appreciate the Art to See program, because I'm not flying by it at 40, 45, right? I'm just taking it easy and on foot. The issue with Havana, well, one of the many issues with Havana is that it's a state highway. So, and you know, back in the day when there wasn't really anything going on in that area and it was more or less used as a throughfare to connect to original Aurora from, you know, basically East Denver, if you will, that made sense. I feel like with how the population has grown in that area, there's so much residential and commercial space there. How can we get the state to cooperate with us on making that a slow zone? Or would that require devolution, I guess, of that strip to make feasible?
That is a good question. I think I was actually talking to a couple folks from CDOT at a conference, I think in 2 weeks ago now, and they said that they have gotten a lot of interest in different speed limits and evaluating the speed limits on state highways, and they're trying to roll out a new process to look at those and to see if there are any that can be changed. So we're definitely planning to work with them on that and see what the options are for the state highways within Aurora, because Havana and Colfax and yeah, I mean, those are kind of our main ones that are more business districts as well. But yeah, in general, I think as far as like designating it as a slow zone, it seemed like Denver's approach was more to say like these are the types of strategies appropriate for these types of facilities. And so another thing that I would think could be interesting to look at on Havana is also the signal timing, because that's something that we are in control of at the city's level. And what Denver's doing is they're putting signs that say like, you know, the signals are timed for 40 miles an hour just to encourage people to go the speed limit if they want to get through on the green band. So I think those are the types of strategies that are in our control, for sure. As far as designating a slow zone and down posting or different things, I'm not sure that that alone would be supportive. And it's also just going back to the fundamentals that switching out speed limit signs or down posting alone isn't going to make the difference. So we're looking at other projects, and then Havana is just also complicated because it's an existing corridor, a lot of existing access points, and physically changing anything would be very expensive. So we're
Yeah.
continuing to work with CDOT on different projects and initiatives, but if there was any like broad sweeping thing we wanted to do, it would definitely be in coordination with them, or devolution, as people like to bring up, though that's very expensive idea.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, and I just want to be clear that like I wasn't advocating for just, you know, down posting that corridor. I don't think that would change anything. And like kind of like what I'm trying to advocate for is how can we, you know, work in harmony with what we got back from the corridor study, right? Where people wanted BRT, they wanted bulb outs, they wanted block crossings, things of that nature. And I think bike lanes were a part of what was suggested to us as well. Although I don't remember if that made it through in like the top priorities for that
Yeah,
corridor.
so we actually just built some bulb outs along Havana, and these are recommendations that were also part of the corridor study. So we just recently built some bulb outs at 6th and Havana and Colfax and Havana. And we also implemented transit signal priority, which we're really excited about. So you'll see like the transit signal heads, and kind of trying to give the transit a few extra seconds of green time so that it's just more reliable. So there are strategies like that we have been working on, and CDOT's been very supportive. And then using the Havana corridor study, we've gotten some grant funding for different sidewalk gaps along Havana. And then one of our curb extension projects that we received funding for is actually for 16th and Havana. So I do think that the corridor study and the partnerships built through that process and with CDOT have really helped. And it's just, you know, it's a big thing to undertake, and there's a lot of different parts to it. So it's not just going to be overnight, but I think we're making some good steps towards that. And CDOT's been helpful with that as well.
No, that's really great to hear. And nothing really has taken place yet then south of 6th Avenue, right? Aside from maybe like some of the signal changes.
South of 6th Avenue. Yeah, so we did transit signal priority at a bunch of signals. So we did it at Parker and Alameda, and actually we did have a bulb out at Alameda where we moved the curb on the northbound side closer to the road, right near that car wash. And then CDOT is actually rebuilding Havana and Yale and Havana and Jewel signals to give us more flexibility with the turn phasing. And totally agree with you. When you walk Havana, it's a different experience. I know all the food places based on what signal they're near. So it's lots of good boba and everything.
Oh my God, yes. I've been craving snow for a last couple
yes,
days.
yes. That is great as well. And that's right by a signal.
Yep. I'm headed to Piramides tomorrow, actually, and I'm going to probably swing by Snow afterwards. But anyway.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we'll drive the corridor northbound. Definitely. You should see some different bus stop improvements in the bulb out, and then our transit signal heads as well. So.
Okay. Yeah. So hopefully as the corridor, you know, continues to change, we can implement some more of these ideas there. And I wanted to ask finally, how effective is painting limits on the road? Because, you know, we had just talked about like down signing, like, okay, if someone sees 45 or let's say 35 on a road and they're doing 45, does that really change behavior?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I'll have to dive more into the details of kind of what Denver looked at, because I don't think it's been a very popular strategy in general in kind of the more snowy weather climate states where pavement markings are a little harder to maintain.
Yeah.
But where I see opportunities for those is more in school zones, maybe. I've seen markings that say school, or there maybe are other targeted areas that we could look at. It definitely would not be everywhere. It would need to be done sparingly. And as far as effectiveness, I think that if people really are just going too fast and don't realize it, it could be effective. But for those 5% of people who are speeding on purpose, I mean, very little we can do are going to impact those few folks.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I know I might have mentioned or asked about this in the past, but building material changes for the roads, especially like around intersections. Do you find that that is at all helpful?
Oh my gosh, I am not an expert in that. Cindy or Lynn, any building material? Oh,
in the roadway or
pavers or something, or different types of asphalt?
Pavers, grooved pavements,
Okay.
you know, something to intentionally send that signal to people that like you are probably driving too fast and you need to slow down.
I think that the what I've noticed, especially when you get off northbound E470 and you take the Quincy exit, they've done rumble strips as you're approaching the curb. I think those have been very effective. we haven't run a test case on that, but maybe that might be something we should think about. That's actually a really interesting idea. Regarding pavers, they're a maintenance nightmare.
Yeah.
But we are definitely a fan of those enhanced crosswalks that meet all the MUTCD criteria. So we can definitely look at stuff like that. But Carly and Lynn, maybe we should chat about rumble strips a little bit. I don't know.
I feel like we've looked into those from requests from APD as well. And I think it just could degrade the asphalt significantly, especially with our freeze thaw cycles, is what I recall. Because I think we looked into it a bit a year or so ago, but we could definitely take a look again and see what strategies are out there.
Yeah, 'cause I've seen them used on highways, and frankly, they remind me to slow down when I'm exiting on Parker, from
Yeah.
225.
They might be more
I
common in concrete than asphalt, but yeah, we can definitely do more research on that.
Yeah, just, all about finding creative ways to change our built environment to get people to do the right thing. So, all right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this presentation. So there's not a question in terms of like a direction from the committee at this point. But, I do like the idea of a pilot on Yale. So is that something that y'all are going to come back with at a future date?
So for Yale, our plan was to really rely on the multimodal master plan to inform what different roads we should look at, because we want to make sure that what we do first is prioritized citywide and makes sense from our bicycle network standpoint. So that was kind of our plan, and maybe it could be one of our earlier steps if we're able to do the bicycle master plan first as part of that effort, would be to look more into those. So I also think we would need some consulting help to get that done. And I'm hoping that as part of our transportation master plan effort, that we'd also have an idea of costs for future budgeting, because none of these strategies are going to be, well, I guess they'll all come with some costs, and they could even come with some signal implication costs as what whenever we're changing lane configuration. So that was our thought, was to really tackle that during the master plan effort, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And can you remind me the timeline on that again?
So we're going to kick that off this summer. The request for proposal is out now, so we'll probably have it awarded to a consultant this summer, and then they'll kind of start in on all the different data collection. I think they're going to utilize some different big data sources citywide, hopefully to kind of tackle that piece of it and to define our existing conditions. And then once they have the existing conditions defined, I think they'll roll into the next pieces. And so I'm thinking we'll probably have more information on our bicycle network and those types of elements next year. So I think a lot of this year will be taken up by a lot of the existing conditions and data collection, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does. Thank you. And
Yep.
hopefully the future Ward 4 council member will be supportive of this one. Yeah.
Very true.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you all for the presentation. I really appreciate the time you put into this.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have miscellaneous matters. Cindy, if I recall, you had someone that you wanted to introduce.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to introduce Ryan Germeroth, who has just turned his camera on. He has been here, this is his 6th day with the city. And so he is joining us as the Deputy Director over Engineering Services, which was Victor's position previously. And if it's okay, I'd like to give Ryan just a minute to introduce himself and his background.
Great.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, as Cindy said, Ryan Germeroth. So my background, just to start off, I graduated from the School of Mines out in Golden. And I've been in the transportation industry now for about 18 years, a little over 18 years. I started off on the consulting side for those first 8, kind of in the traffic engineering realm specifically. And in the last 10 years, I've been with the town of Castle Rock in various roles in their public works department, and most recently as their assistant director. So I'm very excited to be starting with the city. As Cindy said, I'm on my 6th day now, so I'm still trying to figure out where everything is and how, processes and procedures and all that kind of stuff. But very excited to be plugged into the engineering, with the engineering teams here at the city. I'm getting involved in some very exciting projects.
Wonderful. Well, glad to have you with us, Ryan. Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.
All right. And moving on here, we got anticipated topics for the next meeting. Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any other miscellaneous items? All right, seeing none. Topics for the next meeting.
Yeah, we have two presentations queued up for next meeting. That they include the previously requested presentation on transportation project delivery process, an overview of that process and timeline. And then also an update presentation on the neighborhood traffic calming program. So more Carly.
Great.
And Carl.
Thank y'all in advance. All right. And then confirming our next meeting, I have it here for the 25th at 1 p.m. Does that work for everybody? All right, I'm seeing a bunch of heads nodding, so we will do that. All righty, and with that, at 2:36, we will be adjourned. Thanks everyone for your time. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.